This video will discuss major spoilers for Firewatch, the original God of War trilogy, and Braid. You have been warned. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Papa Cog channel. Let's settle in for something a bit more personal as I tell you a little story about one of my most hated games. Nearly a decade ago, Firewatch, a visual novel game, released critical acclaim in 2016. Firewatch was a smash indie hit, selling nearly 1 million copies within its first year of release, and received many awards such as the Best 3D Visual Experience at the 2016 Unity Awards, as well as Best Narrative at the 2017 Game Developers' Choice Awards. And so imagine my excitement when I finally sat down and got to enjoy this critically acclaimed experience. And imagine my disappointment when I hated Firewatch. While the game initially received criticism due to some technical issues, it's the ending of the game that the majority of players took issue with. But I don't think the ending was specifically the issue. And actually, I think it was quite a good ending if only one glaring issue had been fixed, and that issue being the main protagonist, Henry. And more specifically, how we feel about Henry. Should we be sympathetic to him, or should we pity him? Now, some of you may pause here and wonder, aren't those the same things? And indeed, at a glance, the two are intimately related. One human being feeling sadness for another. Yet in practice, these two are quite different. Now, bear with me for a personal story, and for those of you who find the topic of one taking one's own life uncomfortable, kindly skip ahead to the next timestamp. This topic, the difference between sympathy and pity, is one that I'm intimately familiar with. When I was 5, my dad decided to take a game over in his life and choose to end his experience with our family forever. And while this was obviously a difficult time in my life, despite me being so young, it was also one of acceptance. It was an emotionally very complex issue for me, as obviously I missed my father, but all was not well in our household. He was often a cruel and mean figure in my life, and frankly, I was almost glad he was gone. In fact, to this day, my memories of him are very rarely the kind ones, and often just those in which he menaced my family and my mother. Yet, despite my feelings about the matter, with his passing, I began to receive pity. Pity for my circumstance, for what I was going through, for having to grow up without a father figure. But the pity I received was at odds with how I was feeling. An antagonist had vanished from my life. It was a good thing for me, and frankly, my life began to be better. But this did not stop the words that I received, nor did it change the words that were said to me, reinforcing that I shouldn't be happy, I should be sad. A reminder that my life was forever changed, scarred, and incomplete. And so I became quite familiar with the differences between sympathy and pity, one of which I enjoyed, the other I despised. Both sentiments are of course rooted in empathy, the ability to sense the emotions of others and to imagine what another may be going through due to their circumstances. Sympathy, of course, is a natural extension of this, feelings of sorrow for another's misfortune. Pity, on the other hand, adds something more. Not only is one sympathetic to your cause, but it's also accompanied with a feeling of regret. A circumstance that cannot be remedied. There is no going back. And in storytelling, this fine line can be the difference between being a hero and being a villain. In Firewatch, you play as Henry, a man who takes a job as a fire lookout in Wyoming after his wife Julia develops early-onset dementia. Unable to deal with the situation, Henry takes the job as a way of doing something new to get his mind off of things. On his first day, Henry is connected via radio to a fellow Firewatch, Delilah, from another far-off lookout. Delilah informs you of some illegal fireworks activity, which you're asked to go investigate. And in doing so, Henry discovers 2 teenage girls skinny dipping in the lake, accusing you of being a bit too interested in their activities. After shooing them away, Henry begins to trek back to his tower, only to discover a bizarre locked cave, and stranger still, a shadowy figure watching him as he does so. But before Henry can approach him, he vanishes into the forest. Unsettled, Henry returns to his watchtower, only to find it ransacked. Unsure if it was either the girls seeking revenge or the bizarre shadowy figure, Delilah asks you to investigate, but before she can finish, the communication lines get cut. In returning to the girls' camp to confront them, you also find their camp completely destroyed. A mystery is thus thrust upon Henry and Delilah, and in these bizarre circumstances, they begin to find companionship in one another, chatting more over the radio as the game progresses, and even a potential romantic interest depending on your choices from Henry, despite Delilah never returning these affections. And you may think that my contention with Henry as a character lies in this cruel act, abandoning his sick wife to find comfort in the arms of another in the woods, but you would be wrong. While Henry's actions may seem unforgivable, there are many characters whom we love and adore that have committed much more heinous crimes. The original God of War trilogy begins with Kratos mercilessly killing his own wife and child. The beginning of the game sees Kratos placed in an unwinnable battle, one in which the only hope for salvation is to pray to the gods. And indeed, Kratos' prayers were answered by Ares, the Greek god of war. But this would come at a cost. Ares would grant him the power to slay his foes only if Kratos would be an unwavering follower to him, to which Kratos readily agrees. But Ares would not be pleased with only having Kratos be a good warrior, but only the best warrior. To improve his abilities and to sever Kratos' familial ties, Ares instructed him to attack a village on his behalf, but unbeknownst to Kratos, his wife and child were placed within a temple there. And through the bloodlust and rage granted to him by Ares, Kratos unwittingly kills his own wife and child. Cursed by the village oracle as the temple burns around him, Kratos is condemned to wear the ashes of his wife and child for the rest of eternity, dyeing his skin a pale white, granting him the title the Ghost of Sparta. And this cruel trick by the Olympians is the inciting incident for the entire story of God of War, resulting in a tale of unrivaled revenge and bloodlust. An all-encompassing desire by Kratos, both for better and worse. For the better, Kratos does indeed succeed at getting his revenge, brutally slaughtering the Olympians for this cruel deception they played upon him, but also for the worse, as Kratos loses his own humanity in the process, killing countless amounts of human innocence as he goes, flooding the Mediterranean with the death of Poseidon and casting Greece into an everlasting darkness with the death of Helios. And yet this is a situation with which we can sympathize. Although his actions are extreme, it is a result of a supreme betrayal by those in which we've placed our utmost faith. Furthermore, this situation is one in which Kratos had no control. It was forced upon him by exterior forces, not entirely dissimilar to Henry and the diagnosis of his wife, Julia. But at its core, while God of War is a story of revenge, Firewatch isn't. It's about something much different. And now to raise our mood with a mid-roll fun fact. Did you know that elephants are the only animals in the world that can't jump? They can swim, however. Also, while you're here, if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps continue to grow our channel, and 99.5% of my viewers have not. But now, back to the video. While Kratos' family is a driving force behind the original God of War trilogy, Henry's wife Julia is not. In fact, she's a topic which can be entirely avoided throughout the entirety of the game, Delilah never even knowing she exists. And the more Henry and Delilah speak, it quickly becomes obvious that Henry's not the only one keeping a secret. Delilah, too, is running from something. Delilah confides in Henry that she's become a Firewatch, too, to avoid a relationship problem. Her boyfriend's relative recently died, and she left him to deal with it on his own, not wanting to deal with it herself, abruptly ending their relationship. But this, too, isn't discussed for long, as the two are all encompassed within the mystery unfolding in front of them. The two continue to find clues suggesting that somebody is both observing and studying them. Henry even begins to believe that this is some form of grand conspiracy, eager to be drawn further into the mystery, further away from the life that he's avoiding. And when Henry discovers surveillance material at a nearby encampment, even Delilah suggests burning the whole place down. And although Henry declines to do so, as he leaves, the camp is set ablaze behind him, which we later learn is by the mysterious figure. Ned was a Firewatch years prior who brought his son to come with him on his adventure. Delilah recalls their conversations, yet he suddenly leaves one day inexplicably. But it's learned later that Ned never left, and neither did his son, Brian. One day, while rock climbing in a cave, Brian slipped and fell to his death. And Ned, unable to deal with this, locks the cave shut and becomes a hermit within the woods, protecting it, ensuring that no one is to discover his secret. That is, of course, until Henry, one day, stumbles across this cave, setting in motion the events of the game, having Ned observe both Henry and Delilah, praying that they don't discover his secret, and, as they get closer, burning the camp down around Henry. All of their situations, of course, are difficult to be sympathetic toward. While all three are faced with circumstances beyond their control, all three react in a pitiable way to these circumstances, choosing instead to confront them, to avoid them wholesale, and lock them away within the woods. And all three of these characters are placed in unfair circumstances, ones in which they had no control over what was happening. Yet our characters do have control over the ways that they react, none of which have done so in a way deserving of sympathy. In fact, it is quite pitiable. And this is a critical element of good storytelling, that we understand the motivations behind our characters and that their actions have meaning and consequence. At a glance, Braid is a fairly straightforward story about a hero, Tim, trying to find his princess, who is away in another castle. But all is not as it seems. As the game describes, Tim is on a search to rescue the princess. She has been snatched by a horrible and evil monster. And yet, almost immediately, it is made clear that the story is not as simple as it seems. Because this happened because Tim made a mistake. And not just one, he made many mistakes in the time that they spent together all those years ago. Memories of the relationship have become muddled, replaced wholesale. But one remains, the princess turning sharply away, her braid lashing at him with contempt. He knows she tried to be forgiving, but who can just shrug away a guilty lie, a stab in the back? Such a mistake will change a relationship irreversibly, even if we learn from the mistake and were to never repeat it. And the princess's eyes grew narrower. She became more distant. But our hero Tim can't accept this. Our world, with its rules of causality, have trained us to be miserly with forgiveness. By forgiving too readily, we can be badly hurt. But if we've learned from a mistake and become better for it, shouldn't we be rewarded for the learning and not punished for the mistake? And Tim becomes obsessed with the undoing of his mistakes, a symbolism not lost in the core mechanic of the game, the rewinding of time. Yet as the game progresses, it becomes clear that not everything can be undone. Certain things are never able to be rewound by Tim's powers, and by the end of the game, Tim's own shadow begins to echo his own actions. A sign that even though Tim may be able to rewind time and forget what he's done, the memory of it still remains. And until this point, Tim is clearly a sympathetic character, one in which we hope he succeeds, one that is able to undo his past mistakes and restore his relationship with the princess. In the final level, everything moves in reverse, except Tim. The princess is shown escaping from her tormentor, an evil knight, and with Tim's aid is able to traverse the landscape, resulting safely at her home, only for her to promptly lock the door, leaving Tim trapped outside. And time then begins to move forward, and the princess runs from Tim. The obstacles which you avoided as the level rolled in reverse were those which the princess set to keep Tim from her as she escaped into the arms of her savior, the knight. You were the monster all along. And here, in a single moment, we go from sympathizing with Tim to pitying him. No longer are we hoping that he succeed by rewinding time and fixing his problems, and now instead these are captured as the desperate acts of an evil man trying to undo that which cannot be undone. And while originally we were sympathetic to him, hoping that he can overcome these obstacles, now the hellish landscape in which he is trapped, reliving these moments, is a satisfying prison for a deeply corrupt man. And unlike the forest in Firewatch, Tim is trapped in a prison of his own creation, forced to relive the moments of his past over and over, in which he views himself as a hero, only for it to be ripped away at the final moment, as he realizes he is the villain. But while Tim is trapped in his own story, the characters of Firewatch aren't, and the forest can't house them forever. In fact, it's started to burn. And so, while God of War is a story of revenge and Braid is a story of denial, Firewatch is entirely a story of escapism. It's about running away from life, from its hardships, from the mistakes you've made. Every character has a troubled past, and every character tries to flee from it, from the mistakes they've made, but unfortunately, all of their circumstances are inescapable facts of life. Reality is forced back upon them, and the fire, symbolic of fate, or possibly even their own lives, is an inescapable force, one that they have no choice but to accept. None of the friendships that were developed last. Nothing was permanent. And so the fire forces them back to their reality. And us back to ours. Now, I said that God of War is a story of revenge, but it is also a story of hope. At the conclusion of God of War 3, Kratos releases Hope, which is trapped within his body due to the extensive guilt with which he carries. And he does so by taking his own life rather than returning this power to the goddess Athena. And this selfless act is one which we can admire, one that we can sympathize with, that Kratos, despite his horrendous actions, has learned from his mistakes and deeply regrets them. And Braid, while a story of obsession, is also a story of denial. Tim is trapped within an endless loop of his own creation and his past mistakes. He's a villain whom we pity, in which it's a satisfying story as we realize that he does not get his princess. Yet his staunch denial is something which I think we can relate to, something with which we can sympathize, despite his shortcomings. But Firewatch has no end. It is simply a game about escapism. We never do learn more about Henry's relationship with Julia and whether or not they're able to overcome the trial in which they're placed. If Delilah is able to fix things with her boyfriend, or if Ned faces consequences for hiding the dead body of his son. And so it's difficult to know how to feel about them. Should we sympathize with their struggles? Should we pity them for trying to run away? And we're still, because we never learn of any future outcomes, the whole game feels pointless. The entire story was contained within the forest, and now it's gone. It's burnt down. Nothing remains. It's simply in the past. And it was this feeling that had left me entirely dissatisfied. I hated it. And maybe that's the point. Firewatch reminds us that no matter how hard you try to escape the hardships of your lives, you will eventually have to face them. And in a way, the game itself forces us to accept this about our own lives. We play video games as a form of escapism. So for a fire in a video game to abruptly eject us from it forces us to confront that ourselves. The game is done. We're back to our lives, back to whatever we were trying to avoid by playing it. And so, while I don't find Firewatch a particularly enjoyable experience, I do find it a valuable experience. And I love that I hate Firewatch. In a very small way, it puts people in a similar situation to the sudden passing of my father. An uncomfortable shock to our lives in which our brief experience with it is the only experience we will ever have. And it's only through confronting these feelings can we actually know how we feel about it. You have to reflect upon it to learn from it. And once you accept that Firewatch has disappointing elements to it, you can look past those problems. And suddenly we're able to experience the greater story it's trying to convey. And like life, there are parts that will be dissatisfying, but that doesn't make the whole thing pointless or bad. And so people who know me no longer express pity at the passing of my father. They can see that I turned out just fine and that I wasn't lying when I said I was okay. Ultimately, it was just a small part of my life. A piece of the forest that burnt down. And to me, when I played Firewatch, I guess I experienced the shock from the other side. I hated Firewatch when I first played it because it was missing critical things that I thought it needed. A clear story, one with clear heroes and villains, sympathy and pity. Much like every boy growing up needs a father. And in time, I came to realize that I was wrong. That even though the story makes me uncomfortable, it's one that's worth hearing. And it's why that I love that I hate Firewatch. Hey everyone, I hope you guys enjoyed this more personal setting, I guess, for a video. I thought that a more kind of mellow tone was appropriate for a bit of a dark story, as this was. And if you're still around, thank you so much for watching. Honestly, I can't understate how much you all have helped me actually overcome some personal depressions in my lives, and just knowing that the things that I enjoy are enjoyed by many other people online, and I enjoy our little discourse. So thank you so much for watching this much. It always helps the videos, and I'm glad that you're still here. As always, if you're not a subscriber, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Share the video with a friend. It helps me in the algorithm and will help the channel grow faster so we can, continue to have these discussions and maybe one day quit my job and do this full time. And if you're still watching, I know that this was a very heavy topic, and right out of the gate, I'm sorry if you're uncomfortable at the personal stories which I told. This is evidently something that I've, had to deal with my entire life, and so I'm very comfortable talking about it, but I understand it is an uncomfortable topic for many. And as this was such a heavy topic, I just kind of want to look right through the camera. If you're going through something difficult, or if experienced something similar to what I did in discussing this video, don't ever be shy with speaking with people. If you find that the people that you're talking to don't sympathize or kind of understand what you're going through, and you're only receiving pity, try talking to other people. That's the only advice I can really give you, but there are people that will listen, I promise you. And once you find those people, you'll be able to kind of deal with those issues and move forward. Which I think it's a good time to remind everybody that's still watching that you are a valuable person and people love you. You have many friends, and I hope that you guys have a great week. And on that positive note, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video greatly, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.